Hey, we are two Star Wars nerds, and today we have another Star Wars Wisdom Talk. Essentially, what we do is we take some of the Star Wars quotes that have impacted us the most, and we just want to share our worldview on what they mean to us. Really, the hope with this is that we can not only share how these quotes have impacted our life to some degree, but also help impact your life.
Yeah.
And maybe this quote can be like the starting point or the lens that you can start to see things through maybe a little differently, and it'll change your tomorrow.
Yeah.
So this awesome quote from Master Yoda: fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering.
Y'all know we had to do this one.
Oh yeah,
No surprise.
easily. And I was debating whether or not I should actually try and mimic Yoda, and I decided against him.
We kind of practiced before, and
No,
it
sound like Kermit.
I didn't sound like anything.
Yeah, it was really bad. But this quote on the first time you hear it, you're like, man, that's really good. And I feel like the more you hear it, it can go one of two ways. It can really start to impact you, and you start to almost meditate on it. You internalize it and think about it a lot. Or you actually begin to just be like, it's just like another whatever. But there's actually so much truth in this. George Lucas infused a lot of truth into this single statement. And obviously this quote about Anakin, his fear of losing his mom and Padme led to anger, and that anger led to the slaughter of the Tusken Raiders, led to hate, and that hate ended up leading to suffering as Darth Vader.
Yep.
But I was thinking about this, fear often masquerades itself as wisdom. What fear likes to do is it likes to present itself as truth. And really, fear will attract whatever information is necessary to legitimize itself. Because there's something about when we're afraid, when we feel backed into a corner, we want to feel like we're right.
Right.
We don't want to feel like there's something wrong going on. And typically fear will reinforce itself. And, I know even personally in your life, you've, like when I met you, you were a very fearful person, and you've overcome a lot of that in your life. But what does this quote speak to you when you're thinking about fear and anger and hate and suffering and the swirling, I guess, cesspool of emotion? Yeah.
One thing that comes to mind is, I don't know where I learned this, but it's like an acronym, I think, where you take the first letter.
Yeah.
I've heard one for fear. It's false evidence appearing real. And really, fear is an emotion, and our emotions are valid, but they're not always what's actually happening. Obviously, there's real fearful things, but for at least personally in my life, most of the time I'm future tripping. I'm thinking of what ifs, and just constantly filled with anxiety. And I think when I heard this quote, even as a kid, it made so much sense to me, because when you're wrapped up in, your emotions and your fear, it's easy to almost get defensive and protective, and that's that anger. And then that anger can lead to hating, whether you're fearful of talking to someone or whatever the situation is, or you can end up hating a situation, a person, whatever, a circumstance, whatever it is, and then that leads to suffering because you're constantly dwelling on it, because that anxiety just keeps bringing it up and repeating things. And I know for me to kind of just get over that, I had to start focusing on different things. Like when fear starts to come, creep back into my life, I start to focus on the truth and what the truth says. And I know that that's more valuable than what's my emotions and my feelings. Not more valuable, but it's truth rather than a feeling. And so just finding that difference of what's an emotion and what's the truth and what's really happening in a situation, and trying to find that balance, and being able to kind of almost step back and look at it as not the person in the middle of it, but look at it from the outside and find that truth. Like, where's the truth? And then grab onto that and don't let go.
Yeah, and it's amazing that when, really, for lack of a better term, when your faith is misplaced in something, it can create that root of fear. And when you are looking at things through the lens of emotion, things can be very heightened, things can be very sensitive, and they can feel very real, but there's always multiple sides to what's going on.
Right.
And so what you're experiencing may not be the full truth.
Right. And we see that with Anakin.
We do, yeah, absolutely.
So
And
it perfectly plays out as a perfect example of what can happen.
And, you know, I was thinking for my own life, something I struggle with a lot is anger. And what I really like about this quote is thinking about fear leads to anger. I think looking at Anakin, I feel like I relate a lot with him, because essentially what I will do, and I see Anakin do this as well, is I have these preconceived notions about how things are going to go. But usually it's on this fear level where it's like, I don't want things to go this way, so I'm going to try and circumnavigate bad things, or I'm going to try and use strength and my intelligence or any sense of power I have to control my life. But then what I find out is I cannot control everything, and inevitably I get let down, and that fear gives way to anger, because then I'm upset at the results, so to speak. I didn't get what I wanted.
I think what you said too is key, where you said you had to let go, and you find that freedom in that. It's like you can't control everything. You can't control life, and that sucks, but it's real.
And I think George Lucas, obviously the Force is a metaphor of something so much greater. And, you know, he pulls from a lot of different worldviews, but, you know, at the end of the day, it is about trusting in something. It's about letting go and not just relying on your own human instincts to lead you,
right?
And to just be humanistic, and that's it. You know, whatever I feel is what I feel. There can actually be something greater. There can be destiny upholding. And what's hard is there's moments in my life where I've experienced suffering, you know, maybe not on the level of Anakin, but I've experienced that torment of my soul. I've experienced that inner turmoil, that inner anger and hate. And it's interesting how it can all circle back really in some way to fear, and not just like, oh, I'm scared of spiders, but it could be like, you know, like I'm afraid of getting fired because what if I end up homeless, or I'm afraid of, you know, not making enough money and providing for my family, or I'm afraid of sickness, or I'm afraid of XYZ thing. And we can fill all of this in, and either we get angry at ourselves or others because they're not meeting these expectations to validate fear. And we can actually start making decisions based on that fear, where it's like, I'm so afraid of this happening, I think this is a wise decision. And you move forward in your life. And what ends up happening, much like Anakin, if you think about Anakin leaving slavery and going into the Jedi Order, and everything was being suppressed, and you were supposed to let go of all of your attachments, almost into another form of slavery. But at the end, Anakin becomes the ultimate slave to suffering, and it was all because of fear. So I think the tragic irony is that Anakin never really escaped fear.
I think too, we see, in real life, also in Star Wars, through Anakin, we see that fear isolates you, and it makes you feel like alone and like you have to do things on your own. And I think if Anakin, from a Star Wars perspective, if Anakin was to go to Yoda or to Obi-Wan or Mace, whoever, and he did open up a little bit to Padme, but if he was to open up more about, here's what I'm fearful of, even and which is scary with the Jedi because he was fearful of losing his mom and the attachment, but so he didn't want them to probably know that. But I think that isolation of him feeling alone made things worse. And I think if you are struggling with fear, it's good to don't isolate, like find someone to talk to. And sometimes even when I'm fearful, I'll start talking to you and I'm like, as it's coming out, I'm like, why am I afraid of that? Like, that was weird. Like, I don't even need you to say anything. It's just like hearing myself say it out loud. I'm like, yeah, don't need to be afraid of that. So I think not getting into that isolation is key too.
And you know, that's how disgusting fear is, because it'll really tear you up on the inside. It'll pull you away from other people. And then it actually gives you this fear of being rejected. Like, if I open myself up, if I try and crawl out of this, I'm just going to end up getting shut down, and you know, I'm not going to be accepted and loved. And you know, what's really incredible is we could go on probably for a while about this, but what we're hoping for these Star Wars Wisdom Talks is that they can be a starting point for not only a discussion in the comments, but also just for a furthered relationship with you. And we would love it if you have any questions or any thoughts and comments that you would love to make. Please leave a comment below. We would love to just engage and interact with you, and just really, like, through Star Wars, just have a real life impact. And like, what a cool opportunity that we have. And so with that, this has been our Star Wars Wisdom Talk. We are two Star Wars nerds. May the Force be with you always.